Well, hello and welcome to the Fairhaven Church Parent Talks podcast, where we desire to equip and empower you as parents to lead well in your home. My name is Kristen, and today I am joined by two of our Beaver Creek people. And so I have Jet, and Jet this is your first time being here.
This is my first time on the pod. I'm glad to be here.
Could be your last time if you don't play
I've been
cards
I've been
correctly.
a fan ever since day one.
I love
this
it.
is exciting. I never thought I'd be in the studio here.
And you made it, episode 10.
Episode 10.
Here you are.
Perfect.
That's awesome. And we have Johnny. Mm-hmm. You're here again.
I keep on getting brought back into
I
this,
know.
so.
You keep getting invited back. It's
Fan
great.
favorite.
Yeah, fan
After
favorite.
the Skyline story from last time, they're like, we got to get this guy back.
Oh, man. Yeah, they might have to go back and check that out, but I don't remember which episode that was. So I just remember it was Skyline ice cream. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good. Still have some in my freezer. You got to stockpile it.
No, terrible. Anyway, I haven't tried it. I'm just assuming. So, Jet, being that it's your first time, can you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do here.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jet. I'm currently a resident serving at the Beaver Creek campus. I run the student ministry there, which has been such a blast. I've been doing that since about last June, I believe, is when we transitioned over. And I've been at Fairhaven for a little over a year and a half now as part of the residency program. So, yeah.
You're married?
I am married. I got married a few months ago. I got married in October, which is not that long ago, but it feels like a lifetime. In
Does
a very
it?
good way. In a very good way. Not in a bad way. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, me and my wife Amalia, we just welcomed our first cat into the household.
Okay.
So that's been fun. The cat's kind of a punk, but
What's
I
the
love
cat's
it, so.
name?
Milo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did hear you say that. Milo. Okay.
Like the sweet tea.
Yeah, I was thinking more like Milo and Otis. Like
Yeah,
that
that's
movie
what I
with
was
the dog
thinking.
And the
Okay.
cat. But
Like Milo and
Yeah.
Stitch.
That's Lilo.
I know.
Okay. All
close
I
right.
ran out Milos there.
You weren't sure what else to say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so question for you both, okay? This is going to be tricky.
Okay.
Okay. So I see both of you walk around with coffee in your hand very frequently. Here at Fairhaven Church, we are blessed with a coffee shop at the Centerville campus. So what is your go-to common ground drink here at the Centerville campus?
I'm glad you asked me that. 'Cause
Okay.
I have two things.
Okay.
One, earlier this summer, we introduced I think it was called the blueberry muffin latte, where it's white chocolate and blueberry.
Okay.
That was my idea. Just wanted to say. I just suggested that.
I hope you
And
didn't
shameless
see my
plug.
face that I made. Oh, no.
Before I tried that, I tried a different coffee shop, Orion Coffee and Tea in Cedarville, if you're familiar with it. I tried it there, and at first I thought it was going to be gross, but it was really tasty.
Okay.
And I don't know if Emily had been trying with it. Emily runs Common Ground. If she had tried that before. But she made a menu item, and I saw people liked it. So I like to get that in the summer. But other times of the year, I like to get a cortado, which is equal parts espresso and milk. And I think I'm like the only one who gets it.
But
so.
it's just not enough coffee. It's little.
But I normally get 2 shots. So that's
okay.
enough to get me like going. You know? And I got a few hours out of me for that one. So.
That's so funny. That's awesome. Johnny?
I feel like this is a little bit harder to follow this up with because I'm not as fancy as Jet.
You're not
Jet,
a
Jet
major
has worked
connoisseur.
at coffee shops before. I have been a man of whatever's in front of me is good. So I usually just do the drip and then I put a little creamer in it. And that's all I do.
That's all you do.
Yeah.
That's kind of boring.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. That's a hard
know.
thing to follow right there.
I know.
But
Well, do you like a flavored coffee or do you like the regular, like roasts?
I used like flavored, but I feel like slowly but surely I just become more of a normal roast guy.
You're getting
We do
older.
have some really good flavored coffee.
I have a lot of gray hair.
He's maturing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the Mackinac chocolate?
Mackinac.
Mackinac. Oh, that's right. I remember we had this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, I don't know anything about.
When you're from
Mackinac
Michigan,
Island stuff,
it's
yeah.
Mackinac.
Yeah.
I'm not from Michigan.
Sorry,
awesome.
Michigan people.
There's not many of them listening, but that's okay. I'm pretty boring with Common Ground too. Usually it's just like a vanilla latte. That's pretty boring. Vanilla
Do
latte?
you get it hot or iced?
That's a lot better than.
It depends, right? Like, it just depends on my mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like black coffee traditionally, but if I'm going to get something here at Common Ground, it's going to be just a little sweet.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I thought people would appreciate that. They can come visit Common Ground and try out some drinks at Common Ground. Emily's awesome, so say hello to her.
She's fantastic. All the people who help out there are great.
Absolutely. Okay, so As we are moving into this week's lesson and we're kind of looking back at what we've been learning, we do see this theme that's consistently going through all of Genesis. Kind of surprising, we're episode 10 and we're still in Genesis, but there's a lot of stuff here in this book.
Got a lot more too.
Got a lot more. It's so true. But so far we see that people are trying to take control of God's plan and what he had already promised to do. And we see this, honestly, from the very beginning. So we see it with Adam and Eve, the Tower of Babel, Abraham and Sarah, and now we see it again with Isaac's wife, Rebekah, and their sons. And so it's literally like a continual cycle. Isaac's wife, so if you remember, Isaac is the son of Abraham. Isaac's wife, Rebekah, is pregnant. So God said to her that twins inside of her womb would struggle together. They would actually become two nations, and the younger would serve the older. And so, Johnny, this is happening in Genesis 27, but we have to take a look back at Genesis chapter 25, verse 23. So tell us why this verse is so important to set up this story.
Yeah, so I have it pulled up right here, and
Yeah.
I won't say the whole verse. I'll just focus in on what God said to Rebekah, but he said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated. Oh, I got the KJV. What happened there? I was like, this doesn't sound like...
Like, it's a little
That's
bit
what he
off, but
teaches
you
out
know.
of every Sunday at Beaver Creek.
Yeah. But no.
Try again.
I got the NLT now. It says, the sons in your womb will become 2 nations from the very beginning. The 2 nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. And so throughout Genesis, we get to see, people messing up all over the place.
Yep.
But also we get to see God's faithfulness. And one of the cool ways that we see this is through God telling Rebekah that 2 sons in your womb will become 2 nations.
Yeah.
Through one of them, Jacob, who we're kind of focusing in on, both of them today. Jacob, he became Israel, and then all the tribes of Israel. So, this is where God was saying, like, hey, to Abraham, you have as many descendants as, the the stars in the sky. And,
the sand on the shore.
Sand on the shore. And now, that continued through Isaac and now to Jacob. And then through Esau, we actually get to see how the nation of Edom, am I saying that right? Edom? Yeah. I always get nervous whenever you get to say like a place from the Bible out loud. And I feel like even more so when you become when you work at a church, it's just so much pressure.
Yeah, I trust Jet.
But
I just do say as confidently as I can, and people think it's right. And afterwards, we're like, that's not that well.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so we get to see God's faithfulness to Abraham and how God will always, be faithful to his promise.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really cool. The 2 nations, and you get to see the 2 nations play out because they are rivals even.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like, as you're reading, because you're saying, Jacob and Esau, the line's going to come through Jacob, but Jacob is not the firstborn.
Yeah.
And so from the beginning, I mean, the Lord literally is talking to Rebekah and telling her, like, this is what's going to happen. And so it's really interesting as the story unfolds how some people are trying to take control, right? Which is, again, what we've been seeing throughout all of Genesis. So, Jet, let's take a look into Genesis 27. We know, as I just said, that God has already ordained Jacob to play a significant role in this story. But as we've seen happen in the book of Genesis, again, all throughout, Rebekah and Jacob, they're trying to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
Here we go again, right? So talk about what we're learning this week with Isaac, Rebekah, and their sons.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about, arguably one of the most famous accounts of Jacob. And with Jacob, it's interesting. We spend so much time with him in Genesis.
Yeah.
He gets introduced in Genesis 25 when he's literally born. So, it's early to can introduce him.
Yep.
And even by the end of the chapter, we see him already live up to his name. Jacob, in the Hebrew, does mean deceiver. Other translations say like supplanter. Basically, like a trickster, you know? And we see that from the very beginning when Jacob is introduced as a child.
Yeah.
We spend 10 chapters with him, a little more than 10 chapters with him. And we see how he starts out very much as like this deceiver, right? This trickster character who tries to get what he wants. But God slowly moves him more into someone made in his image, one who fights for God, who loves to honor God.
Yeah.
And so now we're in like the annoying part of his character arc where he's like a punk. But he's still like deceiving, he's still tricking people. And it's interesting too because while Jacob is definitely in the wrong this chapter, I think everyone involved in the story is wrong.
Yes.
They have different motivations, right?
Yes.
So we know that in Genesis 25, God reveals to Rebekah, like, hey, like the second born's gonna, the older son, who traditionally would be the head of the household, would be the one who, would be the leader of the siblings, is actually gonna follow the youngest.
Yep.
Traditionally in Hebrew culture, the firstborn would receive a ton of different privileges. He would receive a double portion. So let's say me and if I had a brother, I have two sisters, but let's say it's me and I have a brother. Instead of each getting half, how it would be traditionally today, the older brother would basically get 2/3 of that.
Yeah.
Right, you get that double portion. And so God told Rebekah previously, hey, things are going to be a little out of ordinary with this child, but I still have this intentional reason for it, right?
Yeah.
Because it just goes to show how much God uses underdogs and the most unlikely of people to accomplish great things and accomplish His will. So he tells Rebekah this, and I'm certain, it doesn't say in Scripture, but I'm certain Rebekah at one point told Isaac, hey, by the way, the Lord told me that the second's going to become great.
Yeah.
And, Isaac knows this going into it, but in Genesis 27, we see Isaac intentionally try to give his blessing to Esau.
Yeah.
Esau was Isaac's favorite. Rebekah was Jacob's favorite. And it's tough when parents have favorites because, other kids can kind of know that. There's a little bit of tension going on. And we definitely, this is a prime example of why we don't do favorites.
Yeah.
You got to love both your kids equally. You might get along better with some kids than the other kids. You might get them a little bit more, but you got to love them equally. You got to show them that, non-favoritism.
Yeah.
Isaac shows that favoritism to Esau.
Yep.
Esau, and we will talk about this in students, but Esau necessarily wasn't the most pious guy. He wasn't a very God-honoring man. He married, it says in the chapter 4, Genesis 27, at the end, he married a Hittite woman, someone who wasn't part of, Israel or wasn't a part of God's people, which is what he was supposed to do. That's something that Rebekah mentions at the end of Genesis 27 that she doesn't like. She kind of throws shade at Esau a bit. So Esau's in the wrong because, he's not the one who's supposed to be getting this birthright. He's also not one who really just demonstrates himself to follow God. Isaac tries to give Esau this blessing when he really, he shouldn't. And then Rebekah intentionally tricks her husband into giving her favorite son that blessing.
Yep.
And Jacob goes along with it willingly. Yeah. And so we see in the story how really sin, really jealousy and pride can lead us to do sinful things, right?
Yep.
Even though God said, hey, the second born is going to be the one to receive this blessing, they still try to take matters into their own hands and try to take that away from God. They try to play God themselves.
Yeah.
And God obviously worked through this, as we see with the rest of Jacob's story development, that he does become a man after God's own heart. But man, if they had just stayed the course, if they had trusted God's plan and not tried to take it out, things would have been so much easier for them. Because in the aftermath, Jacob never sees his mom again after this story happens, right? And then Jacob also works for a man named Laban for 20 years trying to get, his wife, and he gets deceived himself. And there's just this whole thing where, man, if you had just trusted God's timing, things would have been so much easier for me. But despite that, God still works through it, and God still accomplishes his purpose through Jacob.
Yeah, it's interesting because we see that trap of sin, right? And we know there's consequences for sin. There were consequences for sin then as well, right? And we think about that now when people wrestle through why am I experiencing this after this thing happened? Well, there are consequences for your sin. And so that's what we're seeing play out with what happens to Jacob for years after. But it's just incredible to me how we're continuing to see God specifically say something to the people, and they're just they just don't believe it. And they just try so hard to do it in their own way. Of course, that's quite convicting, right? Because how often do we try to do all those things in our own way? But in this story, there is, you mentioned, so much jealousy. And we do know that jealousy leads to sin, and it leads us to deceive others. So it's really important for us, all of us, to have a heart check. Just what I was just saying, it's convicting to think through, when are the times when I'm trying to take things into my own hands, but also where are the areas in my heart where I experience jealousy? Because we see that is a problem. It leads us to sin. And so that hurts relationships that we have with other people. It was so interesting. I was studying up on this and getting ready for this episode last week. And I'm like, Bible open in my office, going through things, and something happened, a communication came through, and I'll just be honest, like, I instantly went to jealous. I was like, I don't even understand. Like, in my head, I'm thinking all these things, and Bible open again, right? I'm like, oh my goodness, like, okay, God, help me, like, forgive me. I like, this is a sin area that I have, and please, like, take these thoughts away from me. Again, it's like this opportunity to self-reflect on when are those times when I am jealous, because that jealousy does lead to sin. Like, that's where it always goes. And so I think, like, as parents and as families, we really need to have those conversations. I know in our home, we try to be very open and honest when something is happening in our house. Like, if we're angry or something's going on, we try to say, kids, like, this isn't okay, and I need to ask for forgiveness. Well, I think with jealousy, we need to model that too. Like, I know with, I have 3 kids, and I know that they experience jealousy, and there's times when I need to just say, like, hey, you know what? Mom actually really struggles with this in my own life as well, and just be able to have that conversation and talk through it. So I would encourage you as parents to just be honest with your kids, to model humility, and to just give God praise for working in your lives, and to continue, thank Him for continually pointing you back to Him. So there's something interesting, and you kind of touched on it again with Jacob's story, but Jacob is like an unlikely hero, right? He's not really a hero, but it's like, wow, he really messed up. And yet God still really used him in incredible ways. So how can we be encouraged that God used someone like Jacob?
I always like to think of it this way. Like, I feel like I mess up, like, on a daily basis. Like, I'll wake up and I'm like, oh, I already forgot, like, my computer at home. I got to drive back. Or, like, I'll do something. I'm like, why did I do that? And I think the biggest encouragement that comes from this is, despite all their flaws or all their sin or their jealousy or them just trying to control the situation, like, God, like, His plan wasn't thwarted.
No,
Like, He had a plan, and it was going to be accomplished no matter of who they were or what they were doing.
Yep.
Like, God said, hey, this is what it is. This is what's going to happen. I have a plan that's going to glorify me, and it'll be for your good. And even though, like, they took matters into their own hand, God still used it, and God still worked through it. And eventually God established this huge line of descendants that came from this for Jesus to come.
Yeah.
God had this ultimate plan, and no matter what they did, they couldn't thwart it.
Yeah.
And I take encouragement because I'm like, okay, I mess up. I sin. And despite of that, like, God is going to move in ways that I couldn't even imagine. He's going to do something imaginably more than I could imagine.
Exactly.
And just being open to say, hey, God, you direct my steps. Maybe I messed up, but Lord, forgive me, but help me be stronger. Help me to follow your will more every day.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think there's a lot of encouragement in that personally.
Yeah. You have any feedback?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, God uses the most unlikely of people to accomplish His will.
Yeah.
It really makes me think of, like, the song, right? It's not I, but Christ in me.
Yeah.
Right? It's nothing I do that I can accomplish these great things. Not I who save myself, but it's God who does these things.
Yeah.
I think even more so when you think about Jacob and his mom and everyone really in the story and how they sinned in order to get this thing. Like, God still worked through that.
Yep.
But they made it much harder on themselves.
Yep.
So I think some people might be able to, by accident, take the story and see, like, oh, like, God's still going to do His will even if I mess up, and be like, so that gives me liberty to mess up. But in reality, it's like, no, I mean, they still messed up. God still did His will, but you made things so much harder.
There
for
were
yourself,
consequences.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's encouraging in the sense that God does show us that He can work through our mistakes.
Yeah.
It also serves as a reminder to still be intentional about honoring God and trusting Him, even when it doesn't make sense, even when we are jealous, even when we wonder why we don't have this thing and other people have that thing.
Yep.
We have to trust in God's plan, knowing that He's been faithful before, as we see all throughout Genesis, and He's going to be faithful again.
Yeah, I love it. I love just the faithfulness of God, just how it's so clear all throughout the book of Genesis and all of Scripture. It's really incredible. And so as families, that's something that you really need to just process through and talk about and see, like, when has God been faithful in our family? I mean, we see throughout all of Scripture that God is faithful, and we know that he is faithful to us now and forevermore. And so as families, take the opportunity around the dinner table, in the car, wherever you are, to talk through, okay, when have we seen God at work, and when has he been faithful to us? That's really awesome. So before we go, I want to just highlight a couple of things, because we are already in March. And March is going to be gone before we know it. Mm-hmm. So that means we're going to be to Easter real quick. Mm-hmm. So a couple things I want to talk about. Baptism in general, but the fact that Easter is also a great time to get baptized. And so we've seen a lot of people make the decision to get baptized at all of our campuses. And so just want to take a moment to kind of talk through that. How are you guys feeling or experiencing people's desire at Beaver Creek to get baptized? Are you having great conversations about that?
Yeah, I actually have, I think, 2 families that I've been talking to that want to get baptized. And I think Easter is such a great time because, well, when we do our baptism class, we always teach them that it symbolizes, Jesus, when he dies, he goes into the tomb, but 3 days later, he comes back out. So in baptism, we get to share in that symbolism. It's not through baptism that we're saved, or that's a symbolism. But it's a great way for them to say, like, hey, I see what Christ did on the cross. I see that he is Lord and Savior, and I want to follow him. And I want people to know that I've made this choice to follow him. So I think Easter is a great time, and we're doing baptisms at Beaver Creek, which is awesome. And I think Easter in general, fantastic day to get baptized.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what better day to say, like, hey, I am all in, and I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm a follower of Jesus, and I want to make him known to the world around me, So it's a really, really great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you are considering being baptized, if your kid or your student is excited about baptism, if they're talking about it, we have information on our website or on the app you can go to. You can watch a video. You can register there. But, man, it's incredible at Easter time to see lots of people make a decision to get baptized. So we hope that we have a lot of people this year. That would be super awesome. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening. We're excited next week to continue diving in. So we'll see you back next week.